entire space is opened by just that. Hold your hands up like this. Let them fall. One more time, and don't put them down. Let them fall. And once more. Let go completely like that. What is this? Rope chant.
Vast is the rope of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being.
It's a large temple bell in Japan that's been rung. How do you stop it? It's a miscellaneous koan, actually. It's one of the miscellaneous koans. It's some of the ways that the old teachers would teach, except they wouldn't warn you. Or you'd be the one that's being hit. It's not so pleasant. We'd never do that. But there's something about, in that space of silence, the sharpness of it, it kind of moves something, but what is it? What happens? And the dropping, even if you just let go as much as you can still feel, can't you, the effort or the something, What opens on its own, what drops on its own. This is what the koans are pointing to. And what we're studying a bit. So last week, I gave you an overview a bit of the history of koan practice, the kind of landscape of working with koans. And I sent you an additional reading the first week from John Tarrant about koans in general and about those, let's see, what do you call them? I can find them now, those 8 things about koan. What are they called?
Buddhist story is what is happening
that
to
stuff,
them.
Yeah. At the very end, there was a note that it was like an afterwards, a reflection. And I made mention of it, but I want to mention it again because what I sent you this week from Blanche Hartman, Beginner's Mind, is the bridge from this last note. And you don't have to have it, I'll read it to you. He said, I was asked to write about Zen and have written about the path of transformation. It's fair to mention that there's another flavor of Zen in which people don't seek transformation. I'm not sure that's exactly the way to understand it, but it's the way he said it. With the emphasis on seeking, really, is the point. And he clears that up later on. He says, their position is a subtle one, and it goes like this. If you have the nature of awakening intrinsically, then anything you might do to change yourself is unnecessary. If you set off to get awakened, well, you might be making trouble for yourself. They have a point. The paradox in trying to transform your own consciousness is that the effort to change prevents the change. It's like thinking about not falling when you're on a tightrope. It's only going to confuse matters. So that school, which is called Soto, that's our school, doesn't really use koans, and I would say doesn't use koans in a traditional training format, and favors simple sitting meditation and ceremonies as the embodiment of the perfection that already exists. That approach has its own virtues, and Shunryu Suzuki, probably the greatest of the modern masters in America, held it. The two schools, the koan school and the non-koan one, get mixed up, of course, because awakening can strike you when you're not looking for it. So only remind us of that, because this way in which he's reminding us of these two approaches, and his way of saying that Suzuki Roshi, who was the teacher who brought, one of the teachers who brought the Soto way to America, was probably one of the greatest teachers of that and proponents of it, and his lineage is carried on with a great deal of strength. And what I sent you from Blanche is an example of that kind of teaching. What's curious is that this talk that I sent you, which is entitled Beginner's Mind, includes how many koans? Did you count them? 7. The non-koan school, including Beginner's Mind, which is actually the 8th. There's seven specifically, technically 7 koans in this talk from the teacher in the non-koan school. Let's listen to her description of what I call the koan of Beginner's Mind. Okay? If you have it, you can read it. It's the second half of the first page, but you don't have to have it. Beginner's Mind is Zen practice in action. It is the mind that is innocent of preconceptions and expectations, judgments and prejudices. Beginner's mind is just present to explore and observe and see things as it is. That was Suzuki Roshi's phrase. I think of beginner's mind as the mind that faces life like a small child, full of curiosity and wonder and amazement. I wonder what this is. I wonder what that is. I wonder what this means. Without approaching things with a fixed point of view or a prior judgment, just asking, what is it? She says, earlier this week, I was having lunch with Indigo. Now, when she gave this talk, which was, when was it, 2002? 2001. This is 12 years ago. So this child is a teenager now. But I remember when he was born. About this time, because this was the year I was ordained. He was a really cute kid, and they lived at the city center part of the time. And, his parents were really gorgeous. One of those kind of. Our small child at city center, he saw an object on the table and got very interested in it. He picked it up and started fooling with it, looking at it, putting it in his mouth, banging on the table with it, just engaging with it without any previous idea of what it was. That's actually a very good description of how to handle a koan. Look at it, put it in your mouth, bang it on the table. Just engage with it without any previous idea of what it is. For Indigo, it was just an interesting thing, and it was a delight to see what he could do with this thing. You and I would see it and say, it's a spoon. It sits there, use it for soup. You know, it doesn't have all the possibilities that he finds in it. Watching Indigo, can you see the innocence of, what is it? So this is the primary approach of beginner's mind. This is the unending koan of what is beginner's mind? What is this? What is just this? When I was head student at Shuso at Awesome Zen Center, during my training, at the end, among other things, I was given the gift of this calligraphy, which is a representation of the kanji for just this, which is in one of the koans we'll talk about. Let's look at the 7 koans, okay? So once again, you don't have to have them all here, but so the question she's posing of the koan of beginner's mind is, what is it? What is this? What is this? You know, what is it? Which is the antithesis, the antidote to, remember what I said the foundation of suffering was last time? This isn't it. So what is this? Okay, if you have your pages, you can take a look at it. You don't need to. Towards the bottom, the second to the bottom paragraph on page 2. So in China, there was a teacher, Dijang, and you can see there's always the Japanese translation, Rakan, the English use of Chinese, who was a student, who had a student named Feian. Dijang asked Feian, all dressed in his traveling clothes with his straw sandals and a staff and a pack on his back, and Dijang said, where are you going? It'd be obvious, you know. You have your roller bag and your passport, but where are you going? Feian said, around on pilgrimage. Dijang said, what is the purpose of pilgrimage? So now there's that turn, you know. One is like, are you heading for the airport? But then it's like, why? What's the purpose of your travel? Dijang said, what is the purpose of pilgrimage? Feian said, I don't know. Dijang said, not knowing is nearest, or sometimes it's translated, not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is nearest, most intimate. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? What is this? Not knowing is nearest, not knowing is most intimate. So you could just sit with that. You don't have to respond to it right now. This was a koan that I heard her repeat quite a bit in her teachings when I was around her. Or maybe she just repeated it a lot when I was around her. So not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is closest. It's nearest. You know, if you're going on a pilgrimage, the idea is you're going out. But what if this going out with a mind of not knowing was a way of staying close? So she asked the question, so what is this not knowing? This is not the same not knowing as when Jiazhou, that's the same Mu guy, you know. Jiazhou asked his teacher, Nanquan, or Nansen, he's the cat guy, what is the way? Nanquan answered, ordinary mind is the way. Or as your sister-in-law said, stable mind is the way to go. She translated it. Yeah, stable mind is the way to go. Just your mind, the way it is right here and right now. Xiaozhou asked, well, shall I seek it or not? If ordinary mind is the way, seek it or not. Nanquan said, if you seek it, you'll miss it. Xiaozhou said, if I don't seek after it, then how will I know the way? Nanquan said, the way is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. Remember last week? The way is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion, and not knowing is dullness. You try to know, you're going to make up a story. Not knowing, you're not paying attention. So which do you do? When you reach the way beyond all doubt, you'll find it as vast and boundless as outer space. What can that have to do with right or wrong? So this is a foundational koan, because it's so beautifully, it's a beautiful dance between these two. And it's one that's not terribly obscure, but you can see that there's a lot of depth to it, right? Where the student says, what is the way? You just, well, ordinary mind is the way. But you know it doesn't mean ordinary like every day in that sense. It means ordinary in a different kind of way. So it's like, well, okay, then should I work to become close to it? Should I practice? Should I try to seek it? And then he makes that statement that's like we were speaking about earlier. If you seek it, you're going to miss it. And then it's like, well, now what do I do? If I don't seek it, how am I ever going to know the way? And then you get the real paradox, which is the turning point of every koan, the crux. The way is not a matter of not knowing. Knowing is delusion. Not knowing is dullness. So you're kind of without a place to stand there, right? In our ordinary sense, with our ordinary mind. But our ordinary mind's the way. When you reach the way beyond all doubt, you'll find it as vast and boundless as outer space. What can that have to do with right or wrong? So this is interesting because in Dijang and Feian's interchange, there's this not knowing. And then here with Xiaozhou and Nansen, there's this way. And so Blanche goes on, she says, Nanquan's not knowing is paired up with knowing. And this last one, it's a dualistic pair. Not knowing as opposed to knowing. But Feian's not knowing, in the first one, it's just, I don't know. I'm going to go see. I'm just going to set out and trust what occurs. This not knowing is non-dualistic. It's not set up against knowing, it's just, I'm going to set out on a pilgrimage and see what happens. Just this is it, just each moment, just this is it. Each moment, I'll see what happens. With that kind of openness and readiness, Dijang said, not knowing is near us. Feian opened up completely. So those are the first two koans. And they're sort of paired up as knowing, not knowing. Koan number 3, that starts at the top of page 4, it's another story about intimacy. And this one is Lingshan Yangguan, it's a mouthful, and Tongguan Wongji. And so one of these guys carried the robe for the other one. There's a moment in which his teacher needed to put on his robe, so he handed the robe to him, and Duan Kanshi said to his disciple, this is the teacher saying to the disciple who's offering the robe, what's the business under the patched robe? His student, Ryo Zaninkan, had no answer. You wouldn't either, right? Like, what's his business under the patched robe? I'm like, what? The teacher said, to wear this robe and not understand the great matter is the greatest suffering. To wear this robe and not understand the great matter is the greatest suffering. So he said, you ask me. So the student asked the teacher, what is the business under the patch robe? And the teacher said, intimacy. Intimacy. So he bowed to his teacher in gratitude. It said that tears were flowing. The teacher asked, what have you understood? He didn't leave it at that. He's pressing him, what did you understand? Can you express it? He said, what is the matter under this robe? Intimacy. His teacher said, intimacy and even greater intimacy. He just repeated the same thing in a way. But was it repeating? Or was it fresh? I think his teacher wouldn't have let him go on if it was actually just repeating what the teacher said. Somehow, they were echoing each other at this point. There's a way in which in the Soto school we really teach this kind of intimacy, but we do it through forms. Step into the Zendo and bow, go to your seat, bow to, turn away. And through the forms, we begin to kind of wake up to what we're doing in each moment. And there's an intimacy with that, and an intimacy with each other. Sitting next to someone, paying attention when you walk in front of the altar, paying attention to how you manage yourself into Zendo or in walking meditation. And so, for example, when you may not come to us and have to express the answer to a koan, but Peg and I might correct you in a form. And that correction isn't a parental right and wrong. If it's beyond right and wrong, which is hopefully the place we're coming from as best we can, then that's an expression of compassion. To wear this robe and not understand its meaning is the greatest suffering. To do this form and not understand its meaning is deep suffering. So correction is really a compassionate action. That's the koan is the actual form that you don't understand, like why the heck do we bow? Why do we turn clockwise? Why do we step in with the foot away from the altar? It doesn't really matter, really. But to not understand why things matter is the greatest suffering. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. It's an odd way to talk about it. So the forms or the transformational koans that we're enacting in our body all the time. We're not waiting just to go into the teacher and express the koan. We're doing it all the time. And Dogen wrote an extremely important, probably one of his most famous pieces called the Genjo Koan, which is translated as actualizing the fundamental point. And that's going to be the focus of our study for the May intensive. This is probably the most important thing he's written, at least in my estimation. That's going to be our focus. How this koan goes. So, not knowing is most intimate. Ordinary mind is the way. Intimacy. And then she goes on to the next koan on page 6 in the middle. Baofu and Chen Queen. Would you change your name if it was Baofu? They were walking, and Baofu stopped and pointed to the ground and said, right here is the peak of the Mystic Mountain. Kan Queen looked and said, so it is, what a pity. Why would he say such a thing? Well, first off, when the first guy says, Hofuku is the way I know the name more in Choki. So, Hofuku stops and says, right here is the peak of the Mystic Mountain. What's that? He's with his buddy. They're taking a walk in Zilker Park, and he says, they're down in the Greenbelt, Barton Creek. And he says, right here is the peak of the Mystic Mountain, dude. What is he saying?
This is it. Everything's sacred.
This is it. Everything's sacred.
Keep looking.
What?
Don't need to keep looking.
Don't need to keep looking.
Intimacy right now with you.
Intimacy, yes, with this right here. All those things begin to resonate. And then his friend says, so it is, so he doesn't deny it. What a pity. What's that?
This isn't it.
No, he says, so it is.
There's a sense of like loss with
Disappointed.
that ideal, or how you used to understand it, like a departing from.
So he could be expressing a sense of loss in all his ideals.
Yeah,
That could be a possibility.
It's saying goodbye.
Or
He's
separation.
disappointed.
The
Yeah, he's
journey's
looking for
over.
something bigger.
Yeah, he's like saying this is perfect, but not everything else out there. I mean, he's like localizing it seems to perfection rather than realizing everything is.
He could think his friend was saying that.
Yeah.
Or he could be saying, what a pity that not everybody knows it's right there.
That would be another one. Yeah.
I'll miss the exercise of climbing the mountain.
I was walking with one of my teachers at Jocelyn Harlan one time, and I said something about a flower. I said, oh, look, one of those flowers is coming out. And he said, yes, but what a pity to say so. What's that?
Naming it diminishes.
Yeah. It's that. Say it again.
No, she said. I said naming it diminishes.
Naming it diminishes it. Yeah, it's the best you can say about that. Yeah. So it's this, you have to say something, and to name and localize makes something smaller than it actually is. And yet you realize that of course it is. And this small interchange, there's a lot, isn't there? This is what we begin to understand when we're willing to be intimate with what's right here, with ordinary things like taking a walk with your friend.
It's like somebody saying, what a beautiful sunset.
Right. And there are moments in which that's a resonant activity, and sometime when speaking is like, oh. It's not, it's almost like the speaking diminishes it, or the naming, like we said. The next,
It takes you out of the experience.
yeah, it can take you out of the experience. Just like, I know you've had this experience, and I have too. It's a weird feeling of sometimes it's almost painful to go Dharma talk. Especially if you have something you really want to convey. Because you can realize how limited it's going to be, and how far off, how much you're going to fail in a certain way. Now, that's the judging mind. But yet there's also something else about it. Just like when I was reading these things, there was a way in which I was feeling enthusiastic. Now that I'm talking about it, it seems like it's boring. You understand? But yet it's important to talk about.
Like the difference between going into a medieval cathedral and just experiencing it alone, as opposed to having a guided tour.
Exactly.
Well, different people do things differently. My husband likes to tell me the names of the stars. That's his way of connecting with me. And I just want to look, so,
Yeah, there's isn't the Counting the Stars one of the koans in the book? Count the stars. She goes on, the fifth koan is also on page 6, and this is the one we did last time about Turtle Mountain Woke Up, the one that's on my Rakusu. And the phrase that was on the Rakusu about what comes in through the gate is not the family treasure. Hereafter, if you want to help beings, let it flow forth from your heart, cover heaven and earth. That part is fairly easy to understand once you really settle with it. But what about Turtle Mountain Woke Up? That's like saying, Barton Springs woke up. What would that be communicating?
He's really experiencing the aliveness of it as opposed to.
Why didn't he say, I woke up?
All things wake up together.
Was that?
All things wake up together.
All things wake up together? Mount Benel woke up.
With me.
Huh?
With me on it.
Or is there even any me? Yeah.
It makes me feel the same way as I feel about vultures sitting on a lamppost in suburbia. I mean, a lot of these koans. It's really, I could explain it, but the joy I get from them is just beyond explanation.
Well, it's very much like some of you might have been here for inquiry when one person came up and said she was confronted by her young granddaughter asking, why are there bears? You know, it's an impossible question. Like, how do you answer such a question? You could give them the intellectual understanding, but that's not the real response, is it? So this is the peak of the Mystic Mountain, interchange, and Turtle Mountain woke up. The question for you is, where is your waking up, or where are you going to wake up, or what wakes up when you wake up? You know, just take that with you. Where will I wake up?
I was struck by a moment in Tarrant's essay where he points to like this ongoing ambiguity around if it might have happened already or not. You know, like at any given moment, like
How would you know?
what would that be? Yeah, it's like that's kind of keeps you constantly awake. You know,
As if awakening is stalking you.
yeah.
Like you to catch up with you. What was the question you asked me in the back last week?
What was the question?
Do you remember the question about writing it?
No. Oh, you said write it.
What did I refer to? What was I referring to? Do you remember? It may not matter.
It may not. I can't remember what I said. But
You
I
asked a
remember
question about one of the koans or something that opened, and you said, "What do I do?" And you were getting her back. I said, "Write it home."
And it wrote me.
And it wrote you home. Yeah. There is a quote she puts in here on page 7, where she's quoting Suzuki Roshi, when he said, "When you are you, Zen is Zen. Not when you are somebody else." Okay, number 7. Oh, 6. We didn't do number 6. A couple of monks came to the gate, and guy comes out to meet them, says, "What is it?" One of the monks responded, "What is it?" And Zui Fing sort of hung his head and went back inside. They went on around the mountain and they found Yantu in his temple. They told him the story. He said, "Oh, too bad. If only I told them the last word, nobody could have gotten the better of him like that." So they practiced there with Yantu all summer. And toward the end of summer, they came to him and said, "Remember the story about Zui Fing? What is your last word? Like, what is this last word thing?" He said, "Why didn't you ask me about this earlier? Zui Fing and I were born of the same lineage, but we will not die in the same lineage. If you want to know my last word, it is, just this is it." And she says, so these two brothers on opposite sides of the mountain worked in tandem with each other, with their students. Just this is it. And as for this not dying in the same lineage, Suzuki Roshi said, Zui Fing was completely Zui Fing. Yantu was completely Yantu. They were born in the same lineage because they had the same teacher, but they each became completely themselves. Zen is Zen. When you were you, Zen is Zen. So this is what our work is, to become completely who you are. Right here. Right here is the peak of the Mystic Mountain. And then the last one, the last koan she talks about is toward the bottom of page 7. So Tozan and Ungan, his teacher, what he's been studying I haven't even been studying. Well, what have you been practicing? I haven't even been practicing the Four Noble Truths. Are you joyful yet? Because joy is one of the stages, sympathetic joy of the Bodhisattva. Dongshan says, it would not be right to say that I'm not joyful. It's as if I found a pearl in a pile of shit. What is this? Why is he talking so badly? Well, the koan right before is what? Just this is it? I wouldn't say I'm, not joyful. And then the analogy is kind of odd, isn't it? It's like finding a pearl in a pile of shit. Like you never know where you're going to find the pearl, do you?
You still have shit on your hands?
And if you find the pearl, it's not that you're not happy that you found it.
Is what he chooses to focus on? Is it what he chooses to focus on?
I don't know. To me, those last two are paired together also. Just this is it, and the pearl and all the shit is about not going elsewhere. Not turning to somewhere where it seems like it's going to be a better place. You're going to find it here. You're going to find it on your cushion. You're going to find it in your life. You're going to find it in your difficult work, in your crappy relationship, in your struggle with your parents, in your aging body. It's going to be right here. There's going to be a pearl. Right here is the peak of the Mystic Mountain.
It's the exact same as like a lotus in muddy water.
Oh, right, exactly. Like the lotus in muddy water. It's important to remember that enlightenment or awakening, it doesn't really come from the stories and the dialogues, because your true nature isn't contained within an ancient dialogue or a few paragraphs of some interaction between teachers 1,000 years ago. That's not where you find your true nature. Your true nature already exists. Here. You already have what you need. These stories are just help in turning you so you can find it. It's already here. And it's a counterintuitive approach. In our Soto way, Dogen, when he, in the Fukan Zazengi, where he's giving a meditation instruction, there's a section that he copies pretty much out of the Chinese manuals on instruction. And he says, put your legs this way, do your robes. It's very just run-of-the-mill kind of, this is how you sit and rock back and forth. And you get, and then this line, boom, right at the end of this ritual, he says, think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Non-thinking. This is the essential art of Zazen. So after these technical instructions, he throws this thing in. This koan. Think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Non-thinking. This is the essential art of Zazen. And as I was thinking about that, not thinking, as I was reflecting on it, I was also reading in the small book on miscellaneous koans by the nun that I was referring to last time. She said something really beautiful. She says, absence of thought means not being carried away by thought in the process of thought. That's one of the best reflections on non-thinking I've ever read. Absence of thought is not being carried away by thought in the process of thought. It doesn't say anything about stopping thought, does it? Not being carried away by thought in the process of thought. A very mundane and not quite so beautiful way, and I know it's smaller to say it this way, a way of expressing it is opening to your true nature means not being hijacked by any part, even though all the parts of you are still active. Does that resonate? It's a little more kind of concrete way to say it. I know it's not as beautiful and it doesn't express the whole thing, but it gives you a little handhold. It doesn't mean now you're in some perfected state. It means in the midst of the pile of shit, the pearl is still there, but you're not carried away by the smell or the texture.
What was the name of the nun lady?
Our last name is Macinnes, and I can't remember. It's called The Flowing Bridge. Is the name of the book?
I was thinking, I was thinking just now I'm thinking, that the koan of the pile of shit with the pearl, that the pile of shit kind of takes you up and brings the mind back to a more basic level, so it isn't so much me, I found, because as soon as the specific I jumps in, then it's
then we're back to the first koan about if you follow it, you chase after it.
That's just something.
Right.
Because it
All of
seems
these,
like, because you notice, as soon as you notice, you put an eye on it,
right?
and then you're lost.
Then you're back into a personal perspective.
Right, and then.
I remember a Tibetan teacher I sat with one time. He made a sound sort of like the slap, in the midst, and everybody was jumped in the middle of a long meditation. And he said an interesting phrase, which I think is a translation of the old Tibetan phrase into English. But he just, in the sort of riveting kind of space that suddenly opened, he said, "Plumb that gap."
Along with that.
Gap. But it's the same kind of invitation. What if this, which isn't encapsulated in this skin bag, could feel and investigate that whole space that just opened, or whatever it is, even without a name?
Dropping away body and mind.
Dropping away body and mind. So the two chapters that I suggested that you read, the first one was, Bodhidharma's vast emptiness, nothing holy, and Zhaozhou's dog, or Mu. And the short email that I sent out about equating Mu with no, it didn't mean Mu is the same thing as no. It just meant that it was substituted. Mu was substituted for no. Mu doesn't mean no. It's more like does not have or isn't contained by. And one of our friends, Barry Majid, who's one of Joko's Dharma heirs, makes a very interesting point. He says, it's not as if Joshu or Zhaozhou is saying the dog doesn't have Buddha nature. It's as if the monk is asking the wrong question. He's not saying no to the response. He's saying no. You know what I mean? He's saying, not that. That's not the place you're going to find rest. Now, that's not the response to the koan, but that's an interesting way to begin to open it up further than just yes and no. And that was helpful to me in meeting it. So what questions or comments or what did you find this week when you sat with these koans or worked with them at all? What's going on? Vast emptiness, nothing.
Or I don't
You
know.
wrote one
I was
home.
thinking, I don't know.
I found a lot of stability in my sitting practice with it. It's like a lot of the energy that we use, a lot of stories while I'm sitting that I'm worrying about God knows what, every day.
Planning, thinking.
And sort of, I've even had this image of almost like, it sounds kind of cold, it's not, but like if you watch ants sort of inspect like a crumb on the ground or something, just kind of touching and feeling with its antennas. I feel like my whole thinking mind has just been sort of like feeling, rolling this thing around, and it's
Are you sitting with Moo or no? Or?
With no,
Yeah.
just well, it goes back and forth too, Moo and no, and then the part of me that really wants to make sure it's saying the right one or not.
Moo or Mo?
Yeah, and like, but it's like a bone I can throw to the part of me that wants to engage in something while I'm sitting, and it's been really nice. I haven't concluded anything from the process, but
The conclusion isn't important.
Exactly.
It's that actually it's sitting with you. You're sitting it. It's sitting you.
And it sneaks up in the middle of the day. I'll be
Yeah.
talking to people at work, and it'll just kind of like, move in my ear, and I like it. It's it's becoming friendly and intimate, and I'm gonna hang out with it for a while. I think.
I have the most interesting thing. Once I sent a text, I think it was to Peg, in which I used Moo as a word. We were actually a koan, and so my phone learned that. So now it autocorrects a bunch of stuff and just puts Moo into my text. It's just like the damn koan. So it just shows up all the time, and I have to no. And so I was irritated at first, and then I realized it was grace. It's following me around.
So this seems really playful to me.
Yeah.
I like, even all the liveness that was just expressed right then.
Uh-huh.
Whereas, other times I think I approach things with too much seriousness.
And these invite so much seriousness from people, typically because you freeze up when you can't figure it out. And this must be someone who's really serious, can figure this shit out. It's like, ooh. And it's just the opposite. That's one of the reasons I'm giving you John Tarrant, because the language is so fresh and it opens up a little bit. Because some of the Japanese guys is like, keep going, crush it, it's a little tough.
I think there's a lot of performance demands that make it feel heavy to people.
Yeah, and when in traditional
you're seeing a teacher
training.
4 times a day.
Yeah, that's right.
And you need to present your response to the koan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a matter of life and death.
Yeah. When I was in Japan, I went with Grace Shearnson. Have you ever met her before? She's a very interesting teacher. She's in California. I was on this pilgrimage with her. She had been studying with at Tofukuji with Fukushima Roshi, who's a pretty well-known guy. And it is a Rinzai temple, even though she wanted to study with this guy, and she had permission to do so as an American and as a woman. And Tofukuji is a beautiful, beautiful temple. It has the longest wooden bridge in Japan, a walking bridge across this gorge. And we were there in the spring, and the trees were just, spectacular. And so this young man that she knew met us when we got there and took us on a walking tour of the grounds to show us some of the Buddha Hall, and it's really old. And we were coming back, and right as we got to the front of the temple, there's a big driveway that comes up, and there's this wall with a little door gate to go through to get through the wall. And just as we got there, he opened the gate, and Fukushima Roshi was coming back to the temple in his car with his driver. I'll tell you about. And he shuts the gate and he said, "Get down." And so we're like hiding, because we're not supposed to be messing around, And so then they go in, and he says, "Okay, now we can go." So we all go, and we go to this area that's in most temples and most homes. It's not inside, but it's not outside. It's a middle area where you can take your shoes off and stuff. And we asked permission to come into the temple and see the temple there. And there's some negotiations in Japanese with Grace and them, and I'm not. And they say, "No, you're not going to be able to come in." So, well, okay. So we're standing around and talking to this guy, and he says, "Oh, I don't know what the deal is, Then they come back and they talk to us a little bit more in Japanese. And they say, "Well, just come in and we'll give you some tea." So they take us in. There's about 6 of us. And we go to a small room, nice little room. We sit on the floor, And they bring us tea and some little treats. And they say, "We'll give you this, and then you'll need to go." So we said we have that. Then by the time we're finished, they say, "Well, maybe the Roshi will see you." And we say, "Okay." And so we wait, and then we hear them all going in to see him. and we hear the bell ringing, and we can't hear what they're saying, but so like we're waiting a really long time. Then finally they say, well, maybe you can now see him. And so then we finally go into his chamber, or we visit with him. And he was quite kind to us. The interesting thing is this whole thing you have to go through. Can you, can't you, maybe, no, wait.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, all this stuff. Is you see in those very traditional settings that there's a lot of enactment. Oh, they finally finish and they say, okay, now you can see him, but first we have to say Zazen. I forgot that one. So then we go into the Zendo with all the other monks. And in in Rinzai you face outward. And so we're sitting there, all in these lines, and then this dude comes in with a big stick. And he's beating the crap of these guys, really. He's hitting them pretty hard. And I knew as a guest, they're not going to hit us. They wouldn't do that. But came right to the guy next to me and slapped the zabuton with this big stick. I mean, it's a huge noise. And these were 50-minute periods, 5-0. So you're sitting there, and I felt no pain. I was totally alert. This guy's walking, And so we finished, and it's like, oh my God, they didn't hit me, Which, once again, I didn't think they did. But, so all the monks line up, and they're going out, and you have to go in a certain file, to leave. And we're the guests, but they do have us come in the back, because we don't have robes on. We're not them. So we're following along the tokonoma, but the walkway, Gaitan, to go back to the temple. We're wondering, are we ever going to get to see this guy? And they're turning off the lights as we go. Well, this is a temple that was built, 700 years ago. And so it's covered. And so there's uprights and beams. How tall are Japanese? I'm going, boom! Because they're turning off the lights, They got me after all. I'm hitting my head and trying to watch, And then we finally met with him, and he had a big, giant leather club chair with a green phone next to it. And we sat around and had a great time, and he was really sweet to us. But the barriers, they were set up. It really is that whole koan system enacted in the whole temple. It turns out he's a very famous calligrapher, and one of the companies in Japan that makes cookies uses some of his calligraphy. They imprint it on the cookies. Obviously he doesn't write it. He writes the calligraphy and then they print it on the cookies. And so he gave us each a box of the cookies. And as we're leaving, we're walking across this giant room, and he's standing there. And Japanese wave until they can't see you anymore. You never turn your back on a guest when they're leaving. You wave until they're out of sight. So he's waving, and I look back when we're across this big room, and he says, "Take a bite out of my mind." Take a bite out of my mind. It was fascinating to be in that kind of temple with that kind of teacher, even though I wasn't formally involved, and to kind of feel the energy. And it is kind of playful, even though there's a little gaminess to it, that goes with it. But he was quite joyful in a lot of ways. Any other ways that you guys have been working with it, or finding out barriers?
Well, I felt some relaxation, like whoever I am, it's okay to do this my way.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Just that.
It's interesting. At first I thought I was judging the koan, like this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Then I felt the koan was judging me, like, how dare you judge me?
They turn on you, don't they?
Yeah. And the interesting thing was I really was struggling with the word no.
Uh-huh.
And I decided to change it to mu. And all of a sudden it had many possibilities.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't defined. Because mu doesn't mean anything to me.
That's right. And I prefer that. Some people don't because it's too weird, but I like it because it opens up to...
Exactly.
You don't know.
And I felt like it had infinite possibilities. And I'm really enjoying that.
Okay, what you just said, I'm going to repeat what you said, and I'm going to show you what you did when you said it.
Okay.
You said it had infinite possibilities. Okay? So do that again, only just say infinite possibilities.
Infinite possibilities.
Well, where are you pointing?
To my heart.
Yeah. What has infinite possibilities?
What can come out of it, I guess.
Which is mu.
Mu.
It's just mu. It's infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just this is it.
Yeah. This is it. You know, it's just like it's just mu. It's just can be anything. You know?
How tall is mu?
It's infinite. It's just.
No, that's too
I
general.
can't define it.
That's too general. How old is mu?
Well, mu is 2.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really true for you?
Yeah. Because I can tell you why. Because my
But
dog.
that's not it.
Okay.
We're going somewhere with this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's it's Dr. Seuss. Read it to them.
Sometimes the questions are complicated and the answers are simple.
We'll put it on the altar.
One of the things that really helped me was that simple sentence, 1, 2, 3, rhinoceros.
You went on to the rhinoceros.
Yes.
You broke the rules.
It's
You're
just,
following Joan.
I didn't say you were okay.
it's opened up a huge
Yeah.
space
It
just to
does.
have it. You know, those few words. And, you know, it was like a huge chasm opened up in a way.
Yes.
And I felt leaping over it, and, well, I could fall in. I could fly. I mean, those are all, I could keep talking and more things would come forth.
That's right. That's right. And suddenly the regular order of things doesn't apply. As if the order of things that we have in our mind is reality. But we find that it's not.
It's very pleasant.
Can be.
Well, or it could be unpleasant. True.
I really, do we have time?
Please.
The spoon and the kid playing with the spoon,
Uh-huh.
not recognizing it as a spoon and therefore making it any number of other things
Mhm.
was really helpful for me because I was realizing that not knowing is a better base from which to operate, of course, than knowing. And I have caused myself a lot of trouble and pain from knowing stuff. And it was just totally revelatory to be like, oh my fucking God, I don't know anything. And it's the most ideal to just accept that and move from there. And I don't know why that didn't occur to me before. I mean, you know, like,
Well,
oh my
it's
God,
not
how can I
culturally
think
supported.
that I know something? It's like, what? That's not the foundation, you know? So
Then anything you know can spring from that,
right.
but that's not the foundation.
Yeah, and it's like that whole, and it's the opposite of intimacy when you think you know. I mean, and like, if
That's
you're,
really nice.
if you're wanting that, why would you pretend like you know? Because it sabotages the whole process. So,
So here's the corollary.
yeah.
That goes with Bodhidharma and Shajo. Page 19. Here's the koan. These are contemporary koans. This one's called Vending Machine. That's the name of this koan. Dainan Katagiri once said, "You take care of your life as if it were a vending machine. You put the coins in from the top and then get the soda at the bottom. You do meditation and you expect something, but life doesn't always go well. The vending machine goes out of order. Then you're mad and kick the machine." So the commentary talks about Katagiri Roshi and goes on to say, there's no Buddhisthood besides your ordinary mind. When a cart does not go, which do you whip, the cart or the horse? It's from an old koan. Do you kick your desire, your results, your means, your understanding? Or do you sit complacently with no nourishment? Where do the conditioned and unconditioned meet? Dainan asked, have you made your world into a vending machine? Have you made your practice into a vending machine? And here's the verse. Red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. The monkey mind is a helpful aid, and a tyrannical master. Is the tail wagging the dog? But I love this idea of life as a vending machine. Are you turning it into something? Here's a follow-up, koan.
Oh, wait.
Yes. Changing.
Yes.
3 ways that you can not have, I think the Dharma gates, and it said a donkey, a broom, and a guiding star, and I wondered what those metaphors are, or if you talked about that
I didn't talk about that.
Do you know what they are?
I don't.
Oh, great. So we can make it up, because we don't know.
They were made up.
Oh.
What are they?
They're different ways by which you get, like, awakened, or,
So
where you
what
go.
is your way? Make your 3.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I was like, probably, whatever one's the most temperamental one would probably be mine, so it'd be like the donkey. Why
But
not?
you don't want to be stuck
I don't want to be stuck.
in being a donkey.
No, I don't.
No.
No. But I think it was a donkey that kicked me.
Uh,
You know what I mean? I interpreted those to mean like the way in which you become aware of something.
what are the 3 again?
A donkey, a broom, and a guiding star.
What does a broom do?
It like sweeps you gently or something. That's how I interpreted
What
it.
about the star?
The star? The star seems like a slow twinkle that, kind of comes over you.
And the donkey?
The donkey kicks your face.
The donkey also carries you along.
Yeah, that's true. And then you can fall off the donkey.
And you've got a lot of opinions about donkeys.
I'm stubborn like a donkey.
And you have these lovely ideas about the others.
I know, and I just made them up.
You did.
I know.
It's all made up.
Yeah. That's correct.
This is what is meant by emptiness. So this one goes with Bodhidharma. A student asked the eminent translator, Tom Cleary, what is meant by emptiness? Tom Cleary replied, it is innocent of concept. I love that. It's innocent of concept. And here's a bit of the commentary. What is emptiness indeed? Innocent of concept. And he had already, right before that, in place the Heart Sutra in here. How many of you are familiar with the Heart Sutra? The chant, no eyes, no ears, no tongue, no nose, no body, no mind. No. What is emptiness? No eyes, no ears, no nose. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert, there are few. And here's the verse. At Tassajara, it's easy to stub your toe on the rocky paths. The vacant trail is totally alive. You get these things, it's like you don't know what they mean, but they seem clear. You know?
Apamata's paths are kind of like Tassajara's paths too, especially when you go out
Yeah.
that door.
If you're not paying attention. I'm going to give you 2 more contemporary ones to go with with Mu. This one is called Mankind Faces a Crossroads. Woody Allen remarked, more than any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other to total extinction. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose correctly. Isn't that how it goes with the koan?
Well, yeah, they want you to get out of your
Totally
ordinary
trapped.
way of seeing things, just sort of jump out of the box thinking.
Paul Goodman, an American social critic, once said, if you're stuck, you're not being creative enough. 1, 2, 3, rhinoceros. Caring leads to frustration. Frustration leads to not caring. Not caring is a mask for not trying, which leads somewhere else. Find where you are and swallow the whole world.
Can you read that one again?
That last part?
The last one.
Those last sentences?
Yeah, please.
Caring leads to frustration. Frustration leads to not caring. Not caring is a mask for not trying, which leads somewhere else. Find where you are and swallow the whole world. outside of the dilemma of may we have the wisdom to choose correctly. And one final one. About these difficult ones, like Mu. Someone asked the Tibetan teacher Chogyam Trungpa, is there a Buddhist equivalent for the Christian term grace? He answered, yes, patience. In the commentary it says, when Buddhism came to China, it dialogued with and absorbed aspects of Taoism and Confucianism. In America, one can see this happening with a variety of disciplines: Christianity, 12-step programs, psychology, physics. Grace in Christianity is often used to mean an unearned virtue or gift granted by God. Patience in Buddhism is one of the 6 paramitas, perfections or practices of a bodhisattva. They are giving, the precepts, patience, effort, meditation, and wisdom. Trungpa's answer was not a literal translation. It was something else. What was it? And the verse, the Avatamsaka Sutra asserts that rocks are alive. Patience isn't punishment. It's the real thing.
Oh, do that one again.
The sutra asserts that rocks are alive. And Dogen echoes this, in Self-fulfilling samadhi, that rocks are alive, walls are alive, trees. The sutra asserts that rocks are alive. Patience isn't punishment. It's the real thing. So these are odd but contemporary reflections on this same. Keep working with these same. Just stay with them, like you're talking about, and see what they open as you move with them. Now, we don't meet for 2 weeks. We meet in 3 weeks. Because I'll be gone the next 2. And we meet, which is like the 7th of March or something like that. So, make sure that you read Rhinoceros, which is number 3. Actually, read 3, 4, 5, and 6.
What, chapters?
Yeah. Rhinoceros, Ordinary Mind is the Way, which you already reflected on. A Condolence Call, and The Red Thread. And when you come back in 3 weeks, have your koan written down, your personal koan, and a little bit of a commentary in your verse.
And your what?
Verse.
Verse.
That's how they're done. There's the koan, the little story, whatever the thing is, and a little something about it that you might want to say about yourself. Remember, the commentary isn't a description; it's something around it. And then a little verse if you want.
Can you just give one sentence on how you write a koan for yourself? What? Okay, never mind. I have the answer.
You're praying at the koan too.
Why are there crawfish?
What?
Why are there crawfish?
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's perfectly fine.
Oh, because of appetite? Because of étouffée?
That's too direct.
Okay.
That's not what
Because
you
of
do.
everything else.
So are we supposed to,
Because of everything else. That's what I was trying to say.
so are we supposed to write our own?
Yeah, that's what I'm confused.
Yeah, write your own.
Oh, make our own up? That's
Yeah.
cool.
So it's a question.
Here's
isn't it?
here's one way that's easy.
No.
And this isn't a cop-out, this is a perfectly good one. Mu is a wonderful koan. What is the one word that you can't wrap your mind around, but they won't leave you alone? What's your word? That would be perfectly fine. You may have a question in your life. You may have a struggle that you're working with that doesn't have an actual resolution type answer. It may be something a child has offered you, your work, someplace you're stuck, or it can be just a word. And just play with it. Don't worry if you don't have. It's not an assignment that you have to like please me with. But play with it. Look up some of the koans, see what they're like, see what it's like to have the koan, the commentary, the verse, and just play with it and see what you come up with. See what the koans come up with. And by the way, since it's Valentine's Day, I have to give you one more. And by the way, here's the preliminary to the koan, and it's my fortune cookie from today.
Start with your spring roll.
Here's my fortune cookie for today. Kindness is very contagious. Give people the chance to catch it from you. That's a great koan for Valentine's Day, isn't it? That's what came out of the fortune cookie. Okay, here's the koan is, what is love? The case. One evening, after the Dharma talk at the Cambridge Zen Center, a student asked Sung San, what is love? Someone said, I ask you, what is love? The student was silent. Someone said, this is love. The student was still silent. Someone said, you ask me, I ask you. This is love. To ask or answer a fundamental question is the give and take of Zen practice. It may not be difficult to stick to the question or the answer. Perhaps something deeper is at work. And the verse? The radio sings nonstop of love, but when does the moon meet the baying wolf? You ask me, I ask you. This is love. Just this is it. Not knowing is the most intimate. Ordinary mind is the way. Right here is the peak of the mystic mountain. That mountain woke up. The pearl. Or 1, 2, 3, Lisa. That was even better, wasn't it? That really stopped your mind. Why not? Bring me the rhinoceros. Bring me Lisa. Lisa's broken. Then bring me her heart. Have a good few weeks.
Can you read that last little one more time?
The last what?
About what is love? I ask you, you ask me.
The actual
Just the
whole
one.
interaction?
Mm-hmm.
You read it.
Where are you going?
Traveling?
And you don't have to read the. Just read the.
I thought
You
you
know,
know,
like, sometimes
Just call the teacher. Just call the teacher Soen instead of that one name.
So the student asked the teacher, what is love? And the teacher said, I ask you, what is love? The student was silent. And the teacher said, this is love. And the student was still silent. And the teacher said, you ask me, I ask you. This is love.
Okay, now do it one more
That's all
time.
I wanted.
Do it one more time, except share the book with Sunny. Okay, now you be the teacher, and Sunny's going to be the student.
Okay.
They're going to say it to each other and act it. Okay.
Okay.
Just the dialogue part?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're the teacher?
And
Yes, I'm the teacher.
and
So I say that.
you go behind them, and you read the part that's the commentary in between. It's not their voices.
Okay.
Can you see it? Okay.
My glasses.
Okay.
Yes.
So anything that's not their dialogue, you read,
Okay, so it starts there.
and just say the teacher.
Okay. One evening after the Dharma talk at the Cambridge Zen Center, a student asked Sansa,
Mm-hmm. Your songs are right.
But who's the teacher?
I'm the
She's
teacher.
the teacher.
You're the
So you
student.
ask the,
Yeah.
ask the question.
What is love?
San said,
I ask you, what is love?
the student was silent. San said,
This is love.
the student was still silent. San said,
You ask me, I ask you. This is love.
continue.
So good.
It's different when you enact it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what you're going to say, and it's kind of funny and silly,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes a difference, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do that.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Sing to I was trying to remember it so I could take it home to my husband.
Yeah, and tell him what love is. I know, I'm kidding.
How would you say it your way?
I was gonna think about that, like you talked about. You were let the question ride you home, and it rode you home. I was gonna think about that on my way home. How I was gonna use that to
Yeah.
make an expression.
Yeah, that's the use of a koan. So let us know.
Okay.
If you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your attention this journey. It's a pilgrimage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you going on a pilgrimage?
I don't know. Me too.
And the response to that is?
Me neither.
No. And
To
the
me, the
koan,
rhinoceros.
I don't know. Not knowing is
Intimate.
Most
intimate.
intimate. Most intimate.
Yeah.
Most intimate.
Yeah.
Most intimate. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll send you things in between.
Okay. Where are you going?
Let's see. Next week I'll be doing the leadership pilgrimage, so I'll be in the Hill Country teaching, and then week after that I'm at the American Group Psychotherapy Association national meetings in